Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink. It is time for some PathOfExile 1 discussion. Welcome to day 3 of Teaser season for patch 3.26 and the upcoming Secrets of the Atlas expansion. Today, Grinding Gear Games put out a video that is about quality of life changes related to the Atlas and also some buffs that the Horizon Orb are getting. However, there are also a couple of hidden little things in this as well. So we'll discuss all of the overt and the covert teasers in this video. I know some of you are probably thinking, hey, I saw the day 1 video, this is the day 3 video, what happened to day 2? There wasn't a teaser on day 2 of teaser season. Instead, Grinding Gear Games made an announcement related to PathOfExile 2. Firstly, Grinding Gear Games mentioned that they are buffing Horizon Orbs to now work on Elder Slayer maps and also on Elder Guardian maps, the same way they presently do on a Shaper Guardian map. So currently, in 3.25, if you apply a Horizon Orb to a Maze of the Minotaur, one of the possible outcomes is that it becomes a Forge of the Phoenix. However, if you have a Veritania-influenced beach map and you apply a Horizon Orb to it, it's going to stay Veritania-influenced, and as a result, kind of doesn't achieve what you're looking for. It might become a temple map that is influenced by Veritania. Well, what's going to be happening in 3.26 is that is also going to randomize which Elder Slayer you've got on that, or if it's an Elder Guardian, it's going to randomize which Elder Guardian. This is going to be a big change, and it's going to affect both solo self-found and trade players in different ways. So let's start with solo self-found. This is the one where it's a bit more obvious. You can get really unlucky on these, especially since Grinding Gear Games started adding a bunch of sources of maps being duplicated. So you end up in this situation where you might have had 32 Elder Slayer maps that have dropped for you, but of those, you've got 14 of one type, and then you've only got 5 of the one that you've got the least of. And this is amplified by the fact that some of those map drop sources are duplicated, and it just happened that none of those 5 rolled the chance to duplicate, whereas some of the ones that you got 14 of ended up getting that proc. In solo self-found, this allows you to just farm up a few Horizon Orbs. We'll talk about how you do that in a sec, because they're not as common as a lot of people think, but you just farm up a bunch of Horizon Orbs, and then you can use those to convert your excess Veritania maps into Drox maps. Now, if you're playing in Trade League, this is something that just makes it a lot easier to sell these maps. Essentially, it no longer really matters whether you've got a Veritania map or a Drox map. As long as it's not corrupted, they're basically the same to anyone that can afford the extra cost of a Horizon Orb, and Horizon Orbs aren't very expensive. They are a lot rarer than Chaos Orbs, they're a lot rarer than most people think, but they're not crazy rare, and they're also not something that there's a huge amount of demand for, and I don't think that's going to change that much. So big improvement for trade that's quality of life oriented, and for solo self-found players, this is something that's going to give you earlier access to particular Pinnacle content. And whilst this directly affects your access to the Elder and Osiris, it also is going to impact your access to the Maven fight and the Uber Elder fight indirectly, and those are 2 of the most important milestone fights for solo self-found play. So that's the first change that's being made. How do we know the drop rates of Horizon Orbs? Well, we don't, but we do have one thing that is data mineable, and that is the relative appearance rates of all of the different Eldritch Altars. I'll put a link to this list down on POEDB, but these appear to match the drop rates of the actual orbs themselves. For instance, one thing a lot of people don't realize, because Orbs of Annulment are not worth a super large amount in trade, but they're actually considerably rarer than Divine Orbs. You'll see here that the Eldritch Altars that give you an Annulment Orb, they have a drop weight of 400. Contrast this to an Exalt or a Divine, and these are both 1,000. What's going on there is that the game is reflecting the fact that even though people don't think of Annuls as being rarer than Divines, they actually are 60% rarer. And to help anchor these numbers a little bit, you can see that the appearance weights for Chaos Orb Altars are 48,000. So what does this mean when it comes to Horizon Orbs? Horizon Orb Altars have an appearance rate of 8,000. So what this means is that they appear to be 6 times as rare as Chaos Orbs. This does actually fit with my personal experience. Horizon Orbs aren't that exciting. You don't really sing when they drop normally, but they might be a bit better in this league, and so it's worth knowing that they are considerably rarer than Chaos Orbs in 3.25, and I don't really expect that to change. So you're excited about the buffs to Horizon Orbs, but you want more of them than the game is going to give you. Let's talk about how you can target farm Horizon Orbs in 3.25. All of these methods I assume will work in 3.26, but who knows what changes will be made. So you can obviously see here that one of these options is mapping aligned with a Searing Exarch. Searing Exarch mapping is pretty reasonable at giving you Horizon Orbs, but you will get 6 times as many Chaos Orbs as you get Horizon Orbs, so whilst you will get a fair number of them, it's not absolutely spectacular. There are a couple of other mechanics that provide them in good numbers though. Firstly, Horizon Orbs were originally introduced in the Harbinger expansion, and they are tied to Harbinger content. So one option that you've got is fighting Harbingers. The problem then is that your Horizon Orbs will come as Horizon Shards instead, and you'll be playing Pick Up All the Pennies. Pick Up All the Pennies is not a fun game, and for that reason, I don't really recommend this, but if you like Harbinger, then by all means do it. So there's a couple of other options that you've got. The first one of these is heist content. Some of the various heist jobs will award Harbinger chests inside them. These Harbinger chests, especially if they're item level 83, they tend to be fairly gifty when it comes to Orbs of Horizons. So that's one to consider. Additionally, in the Delve Mines, there is a chest that shows up very infrequently outside cities, but quite frequently inside cities. I believe it's called Cartographer's Riches, and it's pretty generous with both Orbs of Horizon, which are the bogey prize, and Harbinger Orbs, which are intended as the better prize that comes out of these. However, if you're after the Orbs of Horizons, they will be the more common of the two, so that's something else you can get. The other mechanic that I can think of that gives out a lot of Horizon Orbs is Tujen. Tujen and Expedition tends to drop these quite a bit. So those would be the places that I would look for. Ultimately, I think Heist is the best of these, but if you have a preference for one type of content over the other, then go with your preference. That'll be the way to go. Or actually, don't go with your preference, go with the one that your build is best at. That is going to be the best way to get yourself more Horizon Orbs. So that's everything that relates to the Horizon Orb changes. The other changes though are something that is very visually obvious when you're looking at this, and that is a little pocket where you can store a whole bunch of maps that you've pre-prepared. And you don't have to only store maps there, you can also store Scarabs in there as well. These can then be transferred directly from there into your map device so that you can run your maps directly from them. Now, this will be able to hold 20 different objects, and that's been chosen because 20 is the stack size for Scarabs these days. That's something that's really convenient, and I think one of the core things they're going for here, there's a section of the player base that are extremely fast. This section of the player base might hit level 97 by day 7 of a league. This is not really aimed at them. There's another section of the player base that get to endgame pretty quickly, but that don't blitz maps quite as quickly. And this is primarily a change aimed at optimizing their gameplay, making it so that they spend more time in maps and less time sitting around in their hideout. The reason for this is that one of the things that is most taking you out of the action when you're a medium speed endgame player is rolling a new map each time you finish your last one. And in Secrets of the Atlas, you're going to be incentivized by this system to just batch roll 20 of them. Then, when you're ready, you can just fire them off. Bang, 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 bang. So that's the overt teasers. We have a new pocket where you can store Atlas-related consumables, mostly maps, but also Scarabs, and we also have buffs to the Horizon Orb. However, there's a little bit more that's going on in this. There's some covert teasers too. Firstly, let's talk about things that people have discussed. Is the Originator going to replace Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds? Well, no. The answer is no, because we've got Searing Exarch influence as an option, Eater of Worlds influence as an option, and these three items, not actually every item that this character is using, but 3 of the 4, are simultaneously Eater of Worlds and Searing Exarch influence. You can see that from the artwork that's on them. So we're not looking at replacing that content with whatever 3.26's major new features are. That's something I wanted to raise because a number of people have mentioned that as a possibility. Secondly, let's talk about map mods. Every single map that is moused over in this, I have checked to see whether it's got any map mods that don't exist in patch 3.25, and I've also had a look for some player favorites such as Reflect. There don't seem to be any changes here. So Reflect map mods seem to still be in the game, and everything else that I could see on the map mods is something that could roll in patch 3.25. Doesn't look like there's been any major overhaul there. Now, let's talk about a quality of life thing that is a little bit clearer on Grinding Gear Games' video than it is in my video, but this is something that I think is worth pointing out. This is not something that's talked about in GGG's video, but once the player right-clicks on their Alchemy Orb, then there's a very subtle highlight that shows up around about 10 of these maps down here. So you can see there's a little highlight here around the outsides of this map, same on this one, 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 and I think this one as well, but that's a little bit less clear. What this is it's indicating that these are a valid choice for you to apply the Alchemy Orb to. So they're currently in a normal state and they are not corrupted. This is something that is going to be really, really useful just for slightly expediting rolling of maps and also a number of other things. This is tech that's come over from PathOfExile 2, where it is the default behavior for pretty much every currency orb in that game. So for instance, if you've got a whole bunch of magic items, you can then right click an augmentation orb and then it will show you which of those are currently in a 1 mod state and which are currently in a 2 mod state. I'm expecting that that's being ported for all currencies, but we've got confirmation specifically for the alchemy orb here. Okay, so now we get to the part of the video that I have had to re-record the most times. This is the additional sighting of gold. Why is this needed to be re-recorded a lot? It's because I want to talk about a very important topic, and that is gold sinks. In PathOfExile 3.25, there's a few things you can do with gold. If you've got tens of millions of gold, the best way to spend that is King's March mappers. If you've got single figure millions of gold, then, well, it costs about 1.75 to get the town set up, so that's one thing. But once you've got that paid, it's farmers. Farmers tend to be the thing that give you the best return on that sort of 7-figure amount of gold. If you've got a smaller amount of gold, then there's a few other things you can do as well. For example, you could potentially partially set the town up, that's one option, but you can also use the black market with Faustus. No matter which of these sorts of amounts of gold you've got, 6, 7, or 8 figures, there is also the option of using Faustus's currency exchange, both to just trade for things you want to use yourself, or alternately for currency flipping. Flipping is a topic that I really want to talk about here though, because right now in 3.25, there's quite an opportunity cost to flipping. If you do a whole bunch of it, you're spending gold that means that you can't use King's March mappers as much, or you're spending gold that means that you can't use farmers as much. This is a very real cost, and that's something that limits the amount of people that are engaging in flipping. What happens if the King's March content other than gold doesn't go core in any substantial way? What happens if King's March mappers are gone? What happens if the farmers are gone? Well, in that situation, we're going to have a position where a lot more people are incentivized to get into flipping. What happens when a lot more people get involved in flipping of currency in a game? Any sort of changes that start taking place in the prices of various commodities that people want to trade a lot, they become very, very volatile. Price changes that might have taken several days to go through the economy start happening in minutes instead. So for instance, I believe we're talking about Sanctum League here. My memory might not be exactly right. There was a period of about 36 hours where players just lost any confidence in the future value of the Chaos Orb. And the Chaos Orb dropped from 200 to the Divine to about 310 against the Divine. This process took about 36 hours. And the way that that tends to happen is that individual players start noticing, oh, I want to get rid of my Chaos Orbs before everyone else does, so I better start buying Divines. More and more people start doing this, but the trades are clunky, and as a result, it takes them a while to actually execute them all. What happens though, when you've got something like Faustus and there's no real opportunity cost, is that everyone gets out of their current map, maybe even portals out as soon as they realize that there's a big price swing happening, and they immediately go, okay, I'm just going to quickly spend all my Chaos Orbs to buy Divine Orbs directly off the market, and as a result, the price swing that was already going to happen takes place very, very fast. This becomes extremely disruptive to ordinary players when you have a situation where Scarabs shoot up in popularity, especially if they're some of the mythic rarity Scarabs, because someone puts out a video. So let's say that popular Magic Find streamer Fubgun puts out a video and he advocates using the Scarab of Radiant Storms. The Scarab of Radiant Storms is often 10 chaos-ish, but it's something that can just explode in price because it is quite rare. So Fubgun puts this video out. What happens in a world where there's a lot of people who have a bit of a sense of the PathOfExile economy and are sitting on a 7-figure amount of gold at that time? Well, those people go and buy every Scarab of Radiant Storms on the market and they relist them higher. This is going to be the consequence if there's not a big gold sink that's added in patch 3.26. I really hope Grinding Gear Games are on top of this. I really hope they don't get this wrong, because the one thing I don't want to see is a situation where half the player base is saying, get rid of Faustus, get rid of Faustus. We want to go back to the old trading system because the current one is just making the rich richer at our expense. It's locking us out of running the Scarabs we want to run, and so on and so forth. That's the worry that I've got. I really hope they can get this right. The way to get it right is to make it so that spending gold via other means is appealing, or alternately, could potentially increase the amount of gold that it costs to trade in commodities that have been extremely spiked recently. So the more volatile it is at the moment, then the more gold needs to be spent in order to make those trades. There'd be a few other things grinding gear games could do as well. Those are the ones that come to my mind just as a first thought. I really don't want to see a situation where we end up like Diablo 3 did, where Diablo 3 had almost zero friction on a lot of trades, and the flow-on impacts that this had on loot across the game got so bad that the playbase ended up celebrating when the game added infinite trade friction, i.e. pretty much removing the ability to trade from the game entirely. So what this comes down to is that if grinding gear games don't have a good gold sink in 3.26, one that's compelling to use, then players who are sitting around with 7 or 8 figure amounts of gold banked will be able to weaponize that in order to reshape the league economy to their interests at the expense of other players. But if there is a gold sink that's compelling to use, then the number of people that are engaged in that level of flipping will be lower, and as a result, the economy of the league is likely to work better for everyone. Hopefully, they get this right. Okay, so what else is hidden in this video? Well, I kind of left one of the most intriguing things for last, and that is this picture of the Atlas of Worlds. Now, I am not going to guarantee that this interpretation is correct, but something that I notice here, we have the core Atlas, and then we have these little side constellations. I do not know if these side constellations mean anything, but what they immediately sing out to me is, this is like PathOfExile 2's Atlas trees, where in PathOfExile 2, you have your core Atlas tree. It doesn't actually have any support for mechanics like Breach on it, but when you defeat the equivalent of Breach Stones in that game, you gain some points that can be used in a subtree that is entirely dedicated to Breach. And there's something similar for Expedition, there's something similar for Ritual, and so on and so forth. I'm definitely not certain that I'm right, but I am curious to see whether these are in some way related to that. Another possible interpretation of these that I've thought up is that this one here could be related to the Cortex. So you've got the Cortex and the 4 different synthesis memories. And so that's a little cluster there that's just separate from the Atlas. Maybe there'll be something indicating that you've done these maps on the Atlas in the future. And then I'm not exactly sure what these are. Perhaps this 5 here that are all connected to 2 of each other. That could potentially be breach domains. Maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but this looks a little bit suspicious to me. I guess we'll find out a lot more of that when we get to day 12 and when we get to the main live stream announcement. Anyways, that's all we've got for today. I'm going to leave it there. May your Horizon Orbs lead you to pursue interesting new horizons against the Elder Slayers and Elder Guardians in patch 3.26.